Kevin Crigger of Toronto, the Kevin Crigger Real Estate Team. Kevin Crigger, CRIGGER.com. Kevin, such a pleasure to speak with you again. Thank you so much for taking the time on this beautiful Wednesday, and even more of a beautiful Wednesday for you. I was just, with respect to the luxury real estate market in Toronto, just absolutely astounding. I mean, you Google Toronto luxury real estate and look at news, and I mean, unprecedented. I don't think that word does it justice. I mean, sales of home prices priced at over $4 million, correct me if I'm wrong, including condos, jumped by a shocking 224% year over year. And that's just one of the many news items that you read, correct?
We really have had one of the most robust luxury real estate markets we've ever seen. We certainly have an established luxury market in Toronto, but really since the beginning of COVID, it's been incredibly active, largely with people spending more time in their home than ever before and not having the same distractions of travel and what have you. It certainly has been a period where a lot of people have made a move, many of which have been contemplating for quite some time, but it has certainly been a very, very active market.
Active is one way to put it. And as you so aptly noted, of course, it, going into the pandemic already very strong, yet this is, in your very successful, amazing career, could you have in any way predicted what you're experiencing now?
No, and the interesting part is that the sort of commencement of COVID, there was obviously a ton of uncertainty and a lot of conversations with clients around sort of where we saw the market going. Based on what we saw leading up to the sort of COVID period, we really didn't see anything that would fundamentally change the market. So, our advice to clients was, let's sort of wait things out if there's some, discomfort in moving forward at this point personally. But really, in terms of overall availability of the market, we've been in a very tight inventory range for a long time. And, certainly with COVID, we finally saw a further boost in demand because people now sort of had the time to really ponder and consider making that move. So certainly surprised at the speed and overall growth in that market, but certainly not surprised as well that, we've maintained really strong activity.
Right. And for you personally, what have you experienced from, over the past, obviously 2021, and also since March, April of 2020, i.e. the beginning of the pandemic? What have you personally experienced, i.e. your, again, incredibly successful career leading up to that, and then now that period, those periods and that period that I mentioned?
Well, I think the unique element to our business is we work really across all price points. We're certainly known for some of the market leading properties that we've sold, and we're certainly known as specialists in the luxury sector. But we really work across all price points, from rentals through to entry level product, right through to sort of top of market inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So we were really busy, and we've been really busy all the way through. We have also done a number of transactions outside of sort of central Toronto because we've seen a really robust cottage market. So I have a cottage up north. I'm also licensed with the local board. And it's been really incredible how robust markets have been across the province of Ontario. So areas where previously they were somewhat sleepy marketplaces. Now with remote work, we have clients that are really sort of moving across the province.
Right, absolutely. And thank you for bringing all of that up. And with respect to, you touched upon rentals, and then also in that you work with expertise across all sectors. So for a moment, segueing out of specifically luxury real estate, what have those sectors been like in Toronto?
Well, the rental market at the sort of beginning of COVID was probably the most impacted. So, people who are renting tend to be the most mobile. So we certainly saw a lot of people give notice and a lot of vacancy come to market very quickly. We had a number of rental buildings we were working on at the time, representing the ownership groups, as well as a couple of new condominium buildings where we were representing all of the owners in sort of facilitating their leasing. And, there were a few painful months where there was a lot available to rent and not as active a pool of tenants looking to rent them. But the interesting part is all of that inventory ultimately got absorbed. And now we're right back to very tight conditions in the rental market. So that, I would say, is the only area where there was definitely opportunity, in that rental prices definitely came down quite quickly. But now, 2 years later, we're back to very tight inventory and, again, market leading prices on the rental side.
Fantastic, which is excellent for both Toronto proper and the surrounding areas. And on that note, what is, with respect to, let's say, again, Toronto, and then you mentioned those outer areas, but with respect to Toronto, have you seen any noticeable differences, positive, I would imagine, with respect to this historic luxury real estate market that you've been experiencing, with respect to, in lieu of course, the fact that we still are living in the pandemic with developments such as Omicron and whatnot, but in terms of the lifestyle, I would think that this, in such a grand, majestic city such as Toronto, I would think that this luxury real estate market would be elevating, not to sound cliche, but elevating the overall lifestyle of Toronto as well, correct?
Most definitely. And I think in terms of the actual homes that sort of make up the luxury market, homes and condos, we've also seen a real focus on services, amenities that, were always a conversation previously, but looking at sort of product that's been built during COVID and looking at some of the developments that are coming sort of in the next couple of years, we're definitely seeing a level of elevation in our market in terms of what will be available. We have internationally renowned designers working on projects here. We have really the sort of best of the best from a technology standpoint being integrated into a number of these projects. So I think we're going to see a much more mature luxury market over the next couple of years as we have product to match it. We've always had beautiful homes, but I think now we'll have beautiful homes that really rival any that exist anywhere in the world.
And how exciting is that for you?
Incredibly. It's one of the things I've always loved about the real estate business is obviously the personal nature and the relationships we develop with clients, but also the spectacular properties that we get to see. They're a huge expression of the people who live there. And
great point.
I really have always loved that ability to sort of see other people's vision and, really on a grand scale, in some cases, it's quite exceptional.
That's fantastic. And you so aptly said, with respect, rivaling, quote unquote, anything on the planet, with respect to anything on the planet, so to speak, what have you seen perhaps with respect to a transition or an increased demand in international attention with respect to luxury real estate home purchases from outside of Toronto, whether it be from the United States or simply, again, throughout the planet?
So I've always had a number of American clients. I'm pretty connected to a couple of markets in the US and, have had long-term clients from California, South Florida, New York. We're definitely seeing a lot more in the way of inquiries from various pockets of the United States, but also quite a few from Europe, Asia. One of the, I guess, challenges in Toronto until fairly recently is, we've been very slow to open.
Right.
During COVID, our government's taken a very cautious approach to reopening basically at all levels of government, from municipal through to federal. But the interesting part is going into this next year, we're looking at the highest levels of immigration we've ever seen. So, based on that, we definitely will have growing foreign demand, which is certainly new to our market. We've had foreign participation at approximately 5% of total transactions. And just based on the number of newcomers to Canada, migration within the country, and I think a real estate market that now appeals to a much broader audience, especially in the luxury sector. And obviously, with the dollar being where it is, it represents really good value for people operating in other currencies. Mm-hmm. So I personally think we're going to see a big lift in foreign demand for sure.
That's fantastic. And it's also reflecting back on our excellent initial conversation or podcast that we had a few months ago. It's also very reflective of what Toronto has to offer in the way of lifestyle.
Most definitely.
It has that, as you and I initially discussed, it has a lifestyle that, or lifestyles, plural if you will, that most large cities cannot rival, cannot touch. And so now perhaps this is that tipping point that everything that you just touched upon so well with respect to the increased attention internationally, which I believe I was hoping you would say that will accelerate. And so then to use the exact term again, but also how very exciting for you, I would imagine, with respect to that, and then how that also will continue to elevate the luxury real estate market, accelerate it, and then further also really enhance the already fantastic lifestyles that Toronto has to offer, correct?
Most definitely, and I think the unique attribute of Toronto is no matter where you're coming from in the world, it's a very comfortable city. From a density standpoint, we certainly have very dense sectors of the city, mostly in the downtown, which have extensive high-rise and what have you. But unlike most other major cities in the world, you can live in a fully detached house on a 50-foot lot within a 10-minute drive of Central Core. That's pretty much unheard of.
Right.
And, Toronto very much is a city of neighborhoods. So we have culturally specific neighborhoods, Little Italy, Little Portugal. We have Chinatown. But then we also have sort of pockets of the city that feel fairly suburban, but are in incredible proximity to centrally located private schools, obviously the financial core, and are also fairly transit accessible. Getting out to the suburbs of Toronto, there's some amazing communities there as well that are certainly well serviced from a day-to-day living standpoint. So, you can shop, dine out, and really do everything you need to do within that suburban community. But you're still in very close proximity to the center of the city, which is really well served by highways, as well to some degree by transit.
And so the infrastructure in Toronto it's very well developed and very well maintained, correct?
Most definitely. We haven't seen substantial additions to our subway system really for many, many, many years. And we've started seeing them with sort of an extension on the North Line, and now there's an East-West line that's basically a light rail transit system that throughout most of the city will function as in the same way our subway does, but it's largely underground. But I think those transit links will also vastly change many of the neighborhoods around them and certainly represent incredible investment opportunities based on the connected nature that will exist when that transit link is complete.
Excellent point. Thank you for touching upon that. Question for you, Kevin. So when you are speaking to your either, well, let's say potential new clients that are international, so to speak, whether they're from the States, whether they're from Asia, Europe, etc. And do you often, or when you do encounter those potential clients that are searching for that next the one that next great city, and Toronto's on their list, but they haven't completely decided as to whether or not it is Toronto, when one, do you encounter that often, or typically is it no, they already have decided on Toronto? And if and when you do encounter it, what do you say to those to really explain, in your opinion, why Toronto?
Well, I think a lot of my role typically for clients or prospective clients is really listening and understanding what it is they're looking for in their move, whether that move is within the city and they're moving from one type of home or one type of housing to another, or if they're moving from somewhere internationally and considering Toronto as an option. You know, for me, the goal really is that they end up in the right place and right type of home. So it's really understanding their needs, understanding, what the goal of the move is, and then really understanding how Toronto fits into that overall opportunity. So we spend a lot of times with people who are considering a move here. The suggestion always is come and, let's explore the city. We sort of spend a lot of time as tour guides as well,
Right.
highlighting, what the city has to offer and then narrowing it down to how that correlates to what they're looking for. And, we've had, I would say, most people who have come and, we've done a deep dive into the city, the market, and the opportunity. Most ultimately have opted to move forward, but there's some who it's not a connection for, and there may be better opportunities. We do have a a pretty long and often cold winter,
Right.
and you know not my favorite season, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity to ski and spend some time outdoors as well. um, and we have really incredible summers. And I think the four seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, I think are one of the greatest things about our market and general area, is that you really get to experience four truly different parts of the year. But again, I had clients from South America and, suggested that they come in winter to really understand what that looks like. And certainly was not something they were looking forward to on a long-term basis.
Right. Such a great point, though, in all its seeming simplicity with respect to the four seasons. I think people that don't experience that, and many people do not experience the four seasons, and how spectacular and fortunate you are when you do get to live in an area in general, but then further in an incredible area, city, if you will, such as Toronto, and truly experience them. And when you're in an area such as the Northeast and Toronto, when on March 21st, you actually realize why the dates of the seasons are the way they are. And on March, I mean, you do, because when you're in a market such as, say, just as an example, Southern California, there are no seasons, and then when you're in it, how really, again, just in all its simplicity, it's just how magical it is. It really is. It's life changing. I experienced that over the past 2 years. It's really incredible. So very good point. Now, circling back to a word you used a few minutes ago, inventory. And you, my friend, are very unique in that in this unprecedented luxury real estate market, whether you're a luxury realtor in general or a leading luxury realtor such as yourself, and whether you're in Toronto or Aspen or wherever it might be, there is such very little inventory. At the same time, you have consistently such amazing inventory, which obviously speaks volumes about you, Kevin Crigger, and that you do in a market such as this have such amazing inventory. I mean, this 200 Cumberland Street, Suite 3702 looks just absolutely amazing. And And then you have the 215 Forest Hill Road. All of your listings are just absolutely beautiful compliments.
Oh, thank you. We're incredibly fortunate that we have, a hugely diverse client base who have been unbelievably supportive throughout my career. But, in this market, having a property to sell certainly is important. But most of our clients are really buying before selling. So it's also finding that property for them to buy.
Right.
I think, one of our biggest advantages in terms of serving our clients well is we have really great relationships with realtors. The real estate business to me is very collaborative. And I've always worked sort of on the philosophy that you always have to have someone on the other side of the table. So whether you're presenting an offer to them, they're presenting an offer to you on behalf of their clients, that sort of two-way partnership approach, I think is incredibly important. So in the early days of COVID, when we had a lot of clients who, weren't comfortable listing their property publicly, weren't sort of sure what the future held, but still really ultimately wanted to move forward with a transaction, just not sure when. A lot of our transactions were done through word of mouth with colleagues. We picked up the phone and, in a very traditional way, called many of our colleagues and sort of said, are you okay? How are you doing? Everything, good. And sort of followed up with, just so you know, we have clients who are looking for these different properties. And certainly, if you have anything that sort of crosses your radar, all of our clients, as you know, are incredibly well qualified, certainly have a great understanding of the market and of values, and ultimately could proceed with a fast or slow transaction depending on your client's preference. So we have a lot of flexibility and really putting it out there. We did most of our transactions that way for probably the first year and a half. And, even now we still have clients who are somewhat cautious and somewhat concerned about sort of publicly putting their property out there because they don't really want a huge volume of people coming through their home. They
Right.
really want sort of qualified people. So even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we just sold a spectacular property where we had a great relationship with the buyer agents who we've done a number of transactions with before. And we offered that as an opportunity to our clients and said, here's the sort of range of value. We obviously, in an inventory starved market, our recommendation would be the broadest possible public exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And the client said, no, if we can achieve this price without broad-based public marketing, that would be our preference, and for a whole host of reasons. So that's what we did. So it really has highlighted, I think, something that I've always known, which is, your reputation and your relationship within the profession is your biggest attribute. Your client relationships certainly are there as well, but if you don't have great connections with colleagues, you're really at a disadvantage to serving your client.
Very well said. And I have not had one luxury realtor of all the amazing luxury realtors that we work with say it that way and say it so succinctly. So thank you. And that's and in listening to you explain it and say it, it's such a powerful asset to have. But thank you for explaining it that way.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Mr. Kevin Crigger, I have now taken 25 minutes of your time. And again, you being one of the busiest people I think that we work with, and I mean that in all sincerity, and that's a compliment, of course. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have during this precious time that we've had, or anything that we didn't touch upon that we should have?
One thing I might sort of mention is a lot of our discussions, and I guess a lot of focus generally, is on the resale market. One thing I'll also mention from a new construction end of market, we obviously have a long track record working with class leading developers on really some landmark buildings, the 200 Cumberland being one of them. And we have some incredible new product coming to market in the Forest Hill neighborhood, which is sort of a boutique 8-story, 25 suite building, 18 of which are direct elevator access. We also have another beautiful building coming in the Yorkville neighborhood in very close proximity to Bloor Street and the Royal Ontario Museum, so right in the heart of the city. And I certainly look forward to sort of providing more detail and definitely marketing both incredible developments through your platform. But,
fantastic. Those sound exciting.
We're certainly seeing, they are, and we're certainly seeing a very robust luxury, very robust new construction in the luxury sector that we've not seen on this scale and at this level of quality in a very, very long time.
Yeah, that is really exciting, and that circles back to what we touched upon earlier in the conversation, and that is reflective of how an already amazing, spectacular, one of the greatest markets on the planet, without a doubt, is elevating during this exciting time, this very exciting time that, forgive me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but in my opinion, it's going to do nothing but continue to accelerate on a consistent basis in 2022 and onwards.
Well, I think looking at Toronto specifically, we've just had a report from Housing Affordability Task Force that was struck by our provincial government. We basically are having a massive issue around supply. It's been a fight that organized real estate has been sort of pushing for the last 10 years, the need to cut red tape and really speed up the development process and incentivize more mid-density development within neighborhoods. And, like many markets, we've had tons of NIMBYism, a lot of very, very slow processes at the municipal level. And based on the report that has come out, we need 1.5 million additional properties in order to meet our current and long-term housing needs.
Wow.
The reality is we've never delivered anywhere near that volume, not even a fraction of that volume to market. So I think based almost exclusively on a scarcity of product, we are going to see continuing lifts in price. We are sort of projecting somewhere around 12% year over year for this year. And I think that's going to be a continuing trend, largely because in the ethos of supply and demand, we certainly have very robust demand and really dwindling supply. So I think an investment in the Toronto market is incredibly secure based on sort of fundamental economics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a question I was going to ask, yet you've answered in a number of different ways, but then you also really just answered it, is with respect to why Toronto right now? And of course, you've answered that in so many different ways, but in its very black and white objectivity, it's in the upcoming year, you expect a 12% increase in price. And so now, simply for that reason, along with everything else we've touched upon and how Toronto's already amazing lifestyle is continuing to elevate, is there, that in all its simplicity, is that why Toronto right now?
Yeah, well, I think Toronto right now for a number of reasons, but I think over and above, incredible quality of life, safety, great cultural institutions, incredible restaurants, just general lifestyle factors that, having traveled extensively and been many, many places around the world, I'm always happy to come home to Toronto. I think where there's sort of a unique element now, certainly on the investment side, looking at many other markets, and, we certainly have worked with clients outside of Toronto and outside of Canada in terms of their investment portfolios abroad. Toronto hits the sort of key fundamentals for investment. So for an American purchaser, there's obviously the currency differential. really the supply demand demographic, I think, or the supply demand dynamic, I think, is really the key factor. In a lot of other markets, you have an abundance of land which can be developed. So a city could sprawl out, and you really have limitless potential for development. Toronto certainly is not that. We are sort of quite limited in terms of developable locations. And, looking at the existing shortage of homes and condos, clearly there's going to be upward pressure on price.
Right.
Just based on the very, very limited supply. So I think that's a unique aspect to our market, especially when you consider the time horizon to bring supply to market. There's certainly other places, especially in the US right now, that are seeing, unprecedented demand and very limited inventory. The difference is in those markets, inventory can come to market in less than half the time that it typically is taken in Toronto.
Right. Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent point. You're so very well spoken, and it's such a pleasure to speak with you, Kevin. And I really, really appreciate the time. Thank you so very much, Kevin Crigger, Real Estate Team, Kevin Crigger, CRIGGER.com. I look forward to when we are speaking again, and thank you again for taking the time today, Kevin.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation, and certainly look forward to chatting again.
Have an excellent day, excellent rest of your week, and a fantastic weekend.
You as well.
Thanks, Kevin.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.